Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final executive Fireside Chat of 2020. My name is Anthony O'Callaghan, and I am the current chair of IT at Cork and also the CIO of the Carberry Group here, headquartered in West Cork. Before we kick off, I wanted to thank KPMG, who've been great at sponsoring this event over the last 3 months. So this was a new series that we launched throughout COVID, and I wanted to thank them for their support. I think it's very fitting that the last, let's say, interviewee of 2020 is KPMG's global CIO, John Applegate. So John, I wanted to welcome you to the session today, and thank you very much for attending. Welcome, John.
Thanks for the invite.
Super. So John, look, again, thanks for agreeing to do this. I also wanted to inform the attendees that throughout we'll be taking Q&A. So as you have any questions kind of throughout the event as well, feel free to just post them into the Q&A section as well. And John and I will pick them up throughout, and we'll try to keep the conversation flowing smoothly as well throughout, right? And we'll pick them up as we go rather than waiting until the end. So John, without further ado, I might kind of turn it over to yourself, right? And I suppose, look, as I said, welcome to the chat. I suppose, KPMG thankfully needs no introduction. So I suppose just in general, how are you guys doing, throughout COVID, elections, et cetera, a lot of chaos over the last number of months. I mean, how are you guys doing? How are you doing?
Yeah, I think it's been just like everybody else. It's been a real challenging few months, or 6 months, 9 months, however long it's been. Obviously, we've never seen anything like this in all of our lifetimes. But I am proud to say that, we've all responded well as best we can, especially with the change of the workplace. Also how we deal with clients, collaboration. It just seems like everything got hit into afterburners, in the March timeframe. And I'm proud not only of what we've done, but what the entire industry has done, right, to react. I mean, if you would have said in February that, hey, almost 80% of the people around the globe are going to start to work from home, that would have been a two-year planning process, and scaling and looking at this and that, and we had a week just like everybody else. So I think we responded quickly. I think that helped to maintain our head above water as far as KPMG. Just like everybody else, we had 3 or 4 months. We had to, hey, what is this, and how do we work with our clients on this? How do we continue doing the engagements? Because business still needed to go on. And so it really took us a while, and now we're starting to see new business coming in. We're starting to see kind of our old business and way of working work. In other areas it doesn't, so we have to find new revenue streams. So I'd say we are pretty much the same as everybody else. And what's funny, I think, is for years we've been talking about we need to change our model, because the basic premise of KPMG, between our audit practice, our tax practice, and our advisory practice is billable hours. Right? We consult and we work with clients on making them better. And that's been our mainstay for 100 years is, okay, we'll send you a team out there and, see 6 people times 8, and that's how we did it. And we've been talking for 5, 10 years. Oh, we got to change that model. We have to, do solutions more, those types of things. And it's all been talk. But it's funny, when you have a pandemic and, how quickly things change, and how all of a sudden investment dollars in a particular area have always been hard to get. All of a sudden now it's, how much do you need?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the thing that amazes us all, right? It's just how quickly we can move when we need to. I suppose that, as you said, like that whole movement off the grid for, all your employee base just happened in a week. As you said, that could be 2 to 3 years of planning, if we weren't in a pandemic situation, right? It's just phenomenal in terms of the reaction.
Yeah. While it was a scary time for the knowing, it was fun because, all the normal, I call it red tape, but, procedures, that you would go through just whoosh, 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 went out the one. It's like, oh, this is fun. Let's just hit the fast button, and just to give everybody a sense of context. So KPMG is about 250,000 people globally. Really spread out in about 150 countries. And we are a federated environment. So we're not like a single corporate with a single mandate and direction from the top and everybody salutes and executes below. Each of the countries, or we refer to them as member firms, are autonomous to a certain degree. So my job as the global CIO is to figure out what are the technologies and standards and policies and security that we need 100% consistency around the globe. So all 250,000 people. And then I work with the larger member firms on that level of agreement and deployment and responsibility throughout. So, I probably work with probably 10 or 15 local firm CIOs, as well as the CTOs of audit tax advisory, and how we govern IT and technology within the firm. So that's just kind of a lay of the land.
Yeah, and it's that genuinely, John, that really fascinated me, right? So, I suppose being at KPMG, I think over 20 years now, right? 22 years.
23 years, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I suppose being there and more significantly being, CIO, right, delivering, solutions, as you said, to 250,000 employees, right? I'm sure countless external customers, right? But, we've had CIOs here on this series in the past, right? But I think your role is fundamentally different to a traditional kind of CIO, right? Where it's not just internally focused, it's also very significantly externally focused as well, right? In terms of keeping up with trends and working with external customers, right? I mean, is that quite relevant in terms of how different your role is?
Yeah, it would have been a lot easier, 10 years ago when clients were mainly local, right? 15 years ago, I guess. And then, I guess it was about 2000, or right after the dot-coms, right? We saw a huge need for the global companies. And, a lot of the percentage of our revenues come from those global clients, whether they're banking or finance or, insurance type stuff. So then the need to do consistency on audit, tax, advisory, and simple things as billing and, getting the best people around the globe, that became everything outside of a country's responsibility. And therefore my remit changed to where, now I've got to come in and, really focus on those global accounts, and anything within there that goes outside of member firms to support, falls in my area, but I still can't do it by myself. Yeah. I need those, IT people and those member firms to do that. I mean, the CIO in Ireland is a good example. John Lillian, he focuses on the Irish market, what he needs for his people. But as soon as something is needed outside, we work together and solve that. And he's, really articulate on what we need on standards and compliance, not only for the U.S. firm, but how do I work with John Lillian for a firm such as Ireland? Yep. So that's the issue where I play more of a UN type of individual, where I come in and say, okay, I know US, you need this. And I know China, you have these territorial issues, much like Russia. And in Germany, you've got this issue with your, governments and all that stuff. But how do we solve this? How do we move it forward? And that's the biggest challenge, and the biggest fun for my job is to figure out how to make progress when I have so many different requirements and expectations from all those member firms. Makes it challenging. And also the other thing I'd say that makes my job challenging is the advisory practice, which is an awesome group of individuals made up with cutting edge thoughts and solutions and those things. But it's almost, like I work for 60,000 CIOs that all know best.
I mean, it's incredible to have that resource at your fingertips as well, right? It's awesome. But I love that. I love that description around you're like the UN internally, right? So like you set the standards and you try to get everyone to maintain or agree to those kind of standards as well. I mean, that must be quite challenging. I think, it's even interesting when I, look back on your earlier career, because to be honest, I was kind of stalking you a little bit ahead of this interview, and I was reading up a little bit about your earlier career in terms of how you were, I suppose, the major driving force in the decision to create the first internal technology platform in KPMG, providing, services globally to these other member organizations that you would mention, just like KPMG Ireland, right? So I suppose, this was the first step in the company's kind of digital transformation, right? So are there lessons from when you did that first that are still very applicable today, right? Because, digital transformation has been that buzzword out there for the last 10 to 15 years. And how does some of those tips and tricks still really apply today?
Yeah, well, what I learned back in 97, 98, when we first started on this journey of internationally working, with KPMG, because back then I was just a individual working on US advisory, we called them consultancy back then, clients. And I had a huge list. And then all of a sudden, the person I reported to out of the clear blue, got nominated as the first global CIO of KPMG. And that was really after, back then, E&Y and us kind of danced a little bit and looked at merging. And that due diligence lasted, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months back then. But at the end, we decided not to. Then that's when our firm said, okay, what we learned out of that process was, we are a little behind in international aspect and coming together as a single entity. So we need to create a global group that looks after this. All right. And so that's why they nominated that. And then all of a sudden they called a meeting of all the technology people in Amsterdam, out of all places. And I remember going around to my team saying, okay, we all have to get passports because we have to go to this place called New Amsterdam. I had no idea. I was a typical American back then, and didn't really know that anything existed outside of KPMG. So going to your question, it took me a while to learn how the firm works, right? Yeah. So you can have a great idea coming out of one-member firm or a section of one-member firm, but how do I internationalize that? How do I take that, especially now when a huge percentage of our client base is international, and they expect the same solutions, the same type of service, the same tools, whether they're in Malaysia or they're being served in Belgium. It's got to be the same. And therefore, I have to have the same set of standards, the process, guardrails, technology, authentication, right? The basic stuff that we know has to be seamless. And so it's knowing how the firm works, and coming up with a good solution, and knowing where I need to go, kind of what Wayne Gretzky used to say, I don't go where the puck is, I go where it's going. Well, I see digital transformation, and this means this, that, and that needs to be enabled. Even the best solution won't see the light of day unless I can provide that. So it's jumping forward. We started on the cloud transformation 3-4 years ago, knowing it was going to be a major thing, because that's where the puck was going to be. And that's what we focused on. In the business at the time, they weren't even thinking about the cloud. It was, my client has a problem, and I have a solution for that. Okay, that's great for that one client, but I'm not going to build one hospital for one patient, right? So how can I build that solution and then all of a sudden offer it to all of our engagement teams around there? Well, the cloud was the only way I was going to do that in a scaled and cost-effective way. So it's seeing where you go, and then, okay, if that's where I got to go, then that means I need to deal with risk. I need to deal with legal. I need to deal with regulatory issues, and all of a sudden, safe harbor's gone now, and it's trans, and just try and stay ahead of the game. I guess that's the biggest opportunity that we have.
And just on that point as well around the external companies, right? So I suppose, look, KPMG and we work very well with you guys as well, right? So you're known across the globe for helping countless companies, right? I suppose drive their digital transformations, right? And I think you touched on it there a little bit, right? Is this a very kind of inside out approach from KPMG? Do you normally kind of run that digital transformation yourselves internally, and then start to take those lessons learned and apply it to external customers going forward, or what? Or are they just disconnected, or do they not connect at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to air a lot of our little dirty laundry, not that we have dirty laundry within KPMG, but if you think about consulting and going into a particular company, and especially a corporation, and you suggest this digital transformation, and it can be agreed and rolled out at the top, that's a different model than coming up within KPMG that I've got to go to a lot of the member firms and try to get. So what we try to do is say, on the digital transformation, there's internal digital transformation, which has a different speed and cadence than client-facing digital transformation, right? So if we have great solutions and capabilities, whether they're in DNA or robotics or whatever is the new bleeding edge type of solution, I can quickly roll that out and make it a product offering for all of our clients, no matter where they are in the globe. Now, taking that concept and how do I roll that internally, that's a different speed case. And we just pick which ones are the biggest benefits. Obviously, we want to have a global consistency on how we deal with clients. We have a bunch of regulatory requirements that we deal, given we have so many SEC and other financial institutions that we have to make sure we comply with. So those are kind of the big ones that we have to do, as well as financial reporting. How can I get consistency in that, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I'm very envious about, right, I suppose, and you touched on it there, I suppose within KPMG, you'll have access to, endless research and strategies as well that'll kind of help you from an IT strategy perspective. I suppose, right? But how does this kind of translate into your approach when it comes to emerging tech, right? I mean, you mentioned kind of robotics there, for example, right? What's your own approach towards emerging tech? Is it important to be a first mover, or is it important to wait for that tech to mature a little bit before you jump in, or kind of what's traditionally been your approach there?
Yep. So in the past, I guess about 2005, 2008, 9, right? When we didn't call it digital then, but we had some cool stuff coming down the pipe, and God, it'd be great if we take this and that, and we dipped into it and we tried, and we got some blood on our hands, right? For the tech that wasn't quite ready, and or we thought that we can control administrative rights within a certain way, but given our federated model, we couldn't delegate. Anyway, we went down a lot of that may be cool, but we just couldn't deploy it within KPMG, right? So that, we ran into some problems. So a slightly different approach of what we did then. So what we did about 2012, 2013 is we actually created a separate group called Lighthouse, which was made up of about 15 member firms, all pitched in and put their best and brightest in a group called Lighthouse. And that was the group that kind of gave we gave them the secret keys to really do the bleeding edge type stuff, and but create it in this lab, create it in this environment, but focus on clients and their needs. And then we kind of had a team that was integrated with them, not only from an infrastructure security and to support them, but also what were some of the elements that we could take that would be ready for prime time to put it for KPMG use, right? So we had a group that did the cutting edge, but we also had a group that said, ooh, that would be good. Let's look at that element within internal to KPMG. That was probably about a 6 to 9 month behind type of process, because we didn't want to be on the bleeding edge, given that the challenges when something like that breaks and we have clients that are dependent on our engagement teams, and then all of a sudden something happens, we look bad. So we want to make sure that we're rock solid. So it's always a balance, rock solid, but yet we're 5 years behind technology. Or do we roll something out and then go, oops, sorry, client, I didn't think all your data would wind up in state-sponsored, cybersecurity attacks. That's a bad one to respond from.
Absolutely. I'd say you'll probably have a lot of applications into this Lighthouse group after, because I mean that sounds incredibly attractive, right? Like being in that group that's evaluating the emerging tech and how that can apply and add value into the business, right? I mean that's a beautiful role or a beautiful group to kind of create as well.
It's funny, just like everything, it had a shelf life, right? So it was hot and heavy, and it got all the investments for that for 4 or 5 years, maybe 4 years. But just last year before, we decided to really start to integrate Lighthouse back into the advisory group, because what we found is, those great solutions and that they come up with for clients, they were really particular for advisory. Not necessarily audit, right? And tax to a certain extent, but not really. So what we did is we said, well, given that 80% of the clients that are using this Lighthouse technologies, let's start to embed that into the normal advisory solutions and have advisory look after the Lighthouse. So that's where we are. That seems like a fairly good cycle, right? And now they're focusing on advisory clients. Tax is doing the same thing that we did from an internal standpoint. They're keeping their eyes open, going, ooh, I'll have some of that, for my client. And, audit is, we're building new technologies and capabilities, but more focused on client collaboration as we do the audits, and more ways of automating the audit as opposed to throwing 100 resources at it for 14 days or whatever. I mean, that seems like the biggest focus within audit.
And actually, it leads on to another question that I had as well, John, right? So I suppose, being CIO for so long, right, you've seen a lot of not just the emerging tech, but the emerging roles as well, right? So just like Lighthouse, where you had this group that went off and looked at emerging tech, I suppose down through the years, we've seen, CTOs originate, just blow up within IT. These roles are just created. You've got CDOs, CAOs, et cetera. The list goes on and on. It seems to get bigger year over year, right? What's your opinion on these roles and how they've evolved over the years, right? I mean, was this at some point the emergence of a different type of shadow IT, or do you kind of see in a proper IT organization, do you see these roles actually reporting into IT so that your CTO would be responsible for that emerging tech and how it would translate back into your standard information technology organization?
Yeah, well, I guess on a whole, on the new acronyms that were coming up, especially the last 5 years, I kind of took an advantage. Let's wait, give it a year, right?
Hmm.
So all of a sudden we need, chief digital officer. That was a big one a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. Let's see how that pans out. And after a year, CDO all of a sudden was chief data officer. I was like, hey, wait, what happened to the digital? Oh, no, that's, last year. So, we kind of wait. And my issue is when you actually look at chief information officer, right? If you break that down, it actually, it's relevant to the data and how do we protect our data? How do we define, classify? If you look at it as pure information, but actually, technology falls underneath this as well. And so it kind of depends on how you define it and what stage you are. And for us, our definitions were so ingrained, it was tough for us to change. So, and that's different than what we consult with our clients, right? So it's kind of we do things a little different internally. But where we are, the CIOs are responsible for the technology, especially as it relates to the security and the infrastructure and the connectivity and collaboration, right? And then the CTOs are to generally focus on functional, what we call the functions of audit, tax, advisory, and our internal functions, taking business requirements and working with us on what the technology solutions or products could be to solve those requirements. That's where we've grounded out. And so my success is figuring out how to work with the CTOs of the functions to enable that. I take their requirements, their thinking, and then I turn to the CIOs with, okay, the bits and the bytes, how are we going to do that? What about this product or that product? What's the total cost? What's our deployment schedule? So that's kind of where we've landed with CIOs on the technology side and the CTOs focusing on business requirements, and they're working with us to transform that into the bits and the bytes.
And do you know, that's great, because we briefly touched on it actually during the week, right, when we were talking about this Wall Street Journal article, right, that kind of talked about the evolution of the CIO role kind of being from, maybe 15 years ago around managing servers and infrastructure and keeping the lights on, right, I suppose, to now moving into this more of a kind of business enablement kind of pseudo like COO role within some organizations. Because I suppose when you look at, processes and let's say a lot of the processes are becoming digital with the introduction of robotics, et cetera. I mean, are you guys seeing any sort of kind of fundamental shift in that CIO responsibility and the responsibility extending into the business functions, just like that CTO role that you described there?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of, that's not a straight path from A to B, and you really have to work with the business to kind of head that way. When we were in the everything's digital stage, right? Digital transformation, we need digital leaders, we need this and that. And it was the new thing we were focusing on. Then, we had a discussion that we had IT, right? Which was pure infrastructure, that's the tag, as well as security. And that's still the basis of what we're doing, but we're moving into the digital and supporting those technologies that enable that in a consistent way across all of our platforms, right? That's just like, but I remember having discussions with, senior leaders in the board saying, okay, because back then I reported to the COO, as probably a lot of people do. And that relationship was pure dollars and budgets and, allocations and the normal type of stuff. And, what I said, well, if we're truly going to be in a digital transformation and, we're going to move a totally different way, then we need kind of a different relationship. And I said, we need a leader at the board level that really is a business leader that understands technology as opposed to a technologist that understands the business.
Yeah.
Right. Key different. And that got transformed into digital. Right. So that's where we were about 4 years ago. And, we've just continued on, and really it's that relationship, that bonding between that business leader and what is needed versus the technologies, capabilities, operational issues, and security and compliance around the regulatory type stuff. I mean, it takes both of those coming together. And if you don't have a yin and yang on that, then you're going to drag, right?
Got it.
That's what we learned. So.
No, makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. Thank you. And I suppose then within KPMG then, right, there's obviously a lot of voices. I mean, you explained the advisory group there, for example, right? But, where did the good ideas come from, right? So look, KPMG, obviously, with your 250,000 employees, right? I mean, it's going to be difficult to probably hear all those voices, right? I mean, is it important to kind of retain an entrepreneurial spirit kind of within the company and kind of give people the opportunity to fail, as well as this where the good ideas come from?
Oh yeah, the old fail fast statement. It's great to say it, but if I fail big time, I'm still going to get fired. So let's define, what does that really mean? Fail fast.
Yeah.
What are the parameters of that? And that is a lot of the job that I do in working with the local CIOs and the business leaders is we want to continue with the mindset of go solve the client needs. Don't worry about restrictions. Be flexible. Be nimble. However, please comply with these set of guardrails, right? Because I don't want to really go into the details, but like everybody else, we've dealt with our issues of data, out there, and we want to make sure to control that, especially when it's client data and the responsibilities we have. So therefore, there's a difference of playing with technologies and solutions and what if scenarios and all that, than dealing with real data that is either our data or our client's data. That's a threshold that we just will not cross and say, if you deal with client data or our internal data, here are the standards of compliance that you must have at global level and local level. So that's a big deal for us. Once you have real information, then that gets us into another stage of responsibility.
Perfect. And John, I might just change it up a little bit if you don't mind, right? And just, I suppose, go across to the elephant in the room around COVID, right? And just kind of focus on that for a few minutes. And I can see we've a couple of questions coming in. Caroline, thank you for the questions, and I'll get to those here in a little second, right? But just one thing I wanted to ask you before that, right, is throughout COVID, we've seen probably a lot of CIOs and IT organizations come out and say that, COVID led their digital transformation, right? And you alluded to it, at the start. I mean, it just made us go extremely fast and maybe roll out technology that we already had on a greater scale, right? But for those CIOs that had, massive leaps forward, right, coming out and saying that COVID led their digital transformation, I mean, what's your kind of take on that? Do you think they were already kind of behind the wheel? Should organizations have been ready for remote working already? Potentially not at this scale, right? But do you think that they were somehow already behind where they should have been because of where the technologies have come in the last few years?
Yeah, I think, definitely COVID helped us, right? Even prior to COVID, we had to support about 30% of our workforce, maybe 40% was remote all the time, right? So we were used to having a big percentage of our people accessing internal information or those things, but we knew that was probably going to get larger, right? So it's supporting that. But to go within 2 weeks of supporting, 30% to 100%, and if we didn't have the M365 or the Microsoft Cloud environment to help us with that scalability and the quick response of the deployment, would have been challenging. If we just had internal Skype or internal Outlook or whatever it is, or the VPNs and those things, it would have been tougher, right? So we were fortunate that we were already about a third of the way deploying our M365. And of course, back in February, if you would have asked me my timeline to roll out the remaining 200,000 seats or whatever M365, I probably would have given you a year and a half type of timeline. And, this country here, and, just kind of do the old way. But, within a month, I think, so by April, we had 250,000 people on. And so we had to take a lot of shortcuts. We had some operational snafus because we were moving too fast. We didn't have the 4i process and the things we normally did. We just removed all that and we just ran, right? And so while that was good news, we also ran with some digital solutions and capabilities because we didn't have the time to do the normal assessment and those things because we were all busy doing the collaboration, making sure our engagement teams had what they needed. So then some of those bleeding edge type of solutions, they were like, ooh, this is fun too, right? Technology's not here saying, no, you can't do this or whatever. I mean, to a certain extent. So once we finished the deployment, it was, okay, we're going to go back to the old way. And of course, the businesses, no, we're not.
Yeah.
We need to run. So, we actually had to roll up our sleeves with them to figure out, okay, so how can you run, but still comply to the guardrails? How can we have more of a central control on our cloud usage, but not restrict people? So it takes 2 weeks to get a instance or a sandbox environment, when, hey, they should have it in 5 minutes by pressing a button. So it's us, we had to reevaluate how we worked and how we also, and we're still continuing to do that. I don't want to think we're done. we have a major work effort going after our target operating model where we should be a year and a half from now, right? So, okay, we did the initial thing because of COVID. We worked out what didn't work, what did work for the business. We've kind of worked out a gap solution, but knowing that the way we work is not going to change. We're not going to go back to the old brick and mortars and have everybody in the offices again. So it's here to stay. And the business and our digital transformation is also here to stay, because that really had a lot of investment, over the last 6 months. How can we make revenue streams, different revenue streams from the old hours, and now's our time, especially with COVID and the crisis that created. How can we help the countries and the companies deal with COVID? Well, we actually made a lot of progress with that. So, okay, let's take that to whatever is going to be the issue next. So us defining our target operating model for a year and a half out, we're starting that right now to figure out. So we'll agree that, and then we'll start that transition, not only between us, but the regions as well as the member firms, as we continue on that, right? Because once you stay stagnant, you're dead in this industry. So,
and I might use this opportunity, John, to kind of touch on it, because it feels like a good time, because you're already briefly touching on the question that Caroline Dowling has. It's around, she's wondering, let's say, what I suppose what will survive, or practices will survive post-COVID. Let's say the whole working from home. Like, what's your kind of take on that? What do you think? If we look a year down the line, or even, as you said, a year and a half down the line at your new IT operating model, right? What kind of stage do you think we'll be in at that stage, right?
Yeah, I think at least for KPMG, I think we are where we are as far as remote workforce. I don't really see a huge transformation back to 70% of the people being in the offices, right? And the major airlines across the globe loved KPMG, and they love PwC. They love all of us, right? Because that's what we do. We fly to clients, we sit down, we fly to internal meetings. I think those days are done, right? Yeah. Yes, we will have a certain percentage that still will travel like we used to, but nowhere near. So our ability to do exactly what we're doing right now, right? Because I would have loved to fly to Ireland and, have a fireside chat with everybody and have nice dinners and all that. Yeah, those days are gone. So how do we support not only this new way of working, but how do we keep adding on additional capabilities, right? Because this is, I don't know, the old Eddie Murphy thing, what have you done for me lately, type stuff. Yeah, this is great, but in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to want this and that and that and that. And oh, look at this solution over here, right? So we we can't let up the gas. And our clients are expecting whoever collaborates with them the best and the most efficient, is the one they want to work with. So we have to keep up that charge. So that's on the internal infrastructure collaboration stuff, but also on the new type of solutions and, the bleeding edge. I keep on saying that list changes every year. It's not just one of top 5, Gartner's top whatever. Well, that's right now. Give me 2 months and guess what? That list is going to change. Yeah. So how do we evolve to, no matter what's on that list, how do we support it? Stop supporting the individual item and support the concept that this is just going to be the way it is. And we're going to have to support a bit of technology solutions that aren't ready for prime time, that aren't baked, but we're going to have to allow people to kick the tires and do what they need to do to support clients. So no more of, no, you can't do that, right? Yeah. Or risk doesn't allow you to do that. It's okay. How can I enable you to do that? And once we agree what it takes to enable that, is it worth it to you, right? Yeah. That as opposed to a flat no.
And I think that's the one thing that COVID, well, one of the many things that COVID taught us, right, is that we've all become a bit more flexible. Like I know ourselves with our upcoming audit with KPMG, a lot of that will be done, let's say, remotely, right? But I suppose if you went back 2 years ago and said, look, we're going to do the audit remotely, there'd be a lot of people kind of raising eyebrows, right? But it's all very possible now, I suppose, with the technology that we've all been using for the last, 8 to 9 months, right? So everyone's just become that bit more flexible, I suppose, going forward, right? But it'll be an interesting one to watch, I think, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I had a discussion with my boss, which is responsible for digital. So he has, technology underneath them as well as the lighthouse used to be before we gave it to them. But the discussion I had is, okay, we're moving so fast, we're being nimble and all that. But if you look behind us, we're leaving a little bit of a trail behind us. So yes, I'm a pure IT guy. I like things. I like zeros and ones. I like how they add up. I don't like to leave dangling participles around and all that stuff, especially from an operational standpoint. Because if you look at all the little cloud instances we have that we
Yeah,
said, okay, you can have this sandbox, you can have that one, you know, okay, don't put your credit card to use that, use this. Well, who's following up to cleaning up? Then after
absolutely.
6 months, that's not there. And by the way, these $1,000 a month, you know, bill for this usage and that usage, you know, time that by 200 or 150
Yeah,
countries, that adds up. That's serious money. So we need, you know, and this is the discussion I had, is we need a holistic view of what's going on all aspects of the cloud, not just
mm,
Azure, not just, you know, AWS, but we got a lot with Alibaba and other things as well. And, you know, there's not a single view of what's going on because the cloud is the new candy store, and
yeah,
everybody's having a field day now. But at some point, you know, the CIOs are going to start adding it up, going, well, hang on, that wasn't so cost effective. Well, that's
absolutely.
because we were flexible and nimble and let everybody do what they wanted. At some point, we need to pull in the reins. You know.
I think like we're probably back maybe 10 years, I suppose, when when you had cloud platforms that I suppose originated from within the business function, and they were signed up within the business function, and we got them back into the IT organization and got a control on spend, etc. But now, because of this crisis we're in, we kind of loosened up the reins a little bit, and suddenly, as you said, right, we're back in cleaning up potentially that technical debt there in a little way, right? But no, I think that's absolutely spot on. Look, it'll just be something to watch, I guess, in terms of kind of how we evolve going forward, right? And you mentioned, I suppose, John, your IT operating model in a year and a half's time, right? So has COVID, well, I suppose it has, right? But to what extent has COVID kind of really made you kind of reassess your IT strategy and make some fundamental changes going forward outside of the remote working, etc.?
Yeah, I think we've focused a lot on, instead of the pure infrastructure, we're still responsible for that. We're still security. That's a given mandate. But it's in the new areas we're focusing on is data governance, tagging data, reuse of data, country compliance. You know, pick your SOC, your ISO, your SRAMS compliance issues. You know, cyber insurance. I mean, oh my God, the regulatory requirements and expectations on all these accreditations are just through the roof. And we have to have that in today's new world. So, it's what do we need to do to work with the engagement teams and then the member firms to comply with those. And also knowing that data is going to be the new gold, whether it's our internal data or client data. How can we, use that data? How can we tag it? How can we keep it secure depending on our client agreements? Because we have to be flexible. Not every client is going to be locked down. They want the protection. If there's benchmarking type of exercise and they want to see how they compare against another insurance, entity, and we have that data, it'd be nice to sell that. Well, hang on, if I lock everything down over here, how can, so it's really tagging it and then ensuring that, we have the right to use or the lockdown, and we give the client the encryption key, whatever, those technologies. So data is a big area that we're going to invest a lot in as far as data management and data handling of what we're doing. The other areas is more of the guardrails and the ability to say, if you're going to run, don't run with scissors, but
Yeah.
Here are the guardrails we expect you to say. And by the way, these guardrails are wide. Don't think they're narrow, but they're wide enough to keep all of us focused on what we need to do and to reduce the risk of the firm of having data leaked outside or going down of a solution that you may build the greatest mousetrap in the world, but you built it on a technology that's going to cost us $10 million to deploy internal to support other clients, right? So, and that's a no-go, right?
Yeah.
But at the other end, I don't want you to only focus on this one Microsoft Azure stack when AWS and others may give you the best thing ever. How do we do that? So we're trying also to really focus on our three clouds, whether it's Azure, AWS. We were doing Google for a while, and we still partner with Google a little bit, but we've seen a lot of clients come back and say, that's not tops on my list to use the Google Cloud. So, and we have a big need in China to use Alibaba and those things for the client within China. So we try to do our guardrails really around those three or four big ones. Yeah.
And when you mention around data being your next big kind of play, I suppose with all these employees now working remotely, not just from the KPMG side, but also from all your clients' side. I mean, let's say where's the the kind of cyber importance now ranking on kind of CIO's kind of watch list, right? Because it was always up in the top 3. I assume it's still going to remain up there. What are you guys kind of seeing in terms of, I suppose keeping the employees safe, keeping the company safe from a CIO customer perspective? What are you seeing when it comes to cyber and protecting companies?
Yeah, very interesting given the news this week or last week, FireEye, SolarWinds, and all that. If I look at our cyber spend within 4 or 5 years ago, it was probably, I don't know, 50% of operations, right? Maybe slightly less. Today it's on par, right? That's how much money and investment, and that's really our lead into data and data protection, right? So we spend a lot of money, and going to the cloud with M365 is really wholeheartedly how do we take on not only the Microsoft suite of security, whether it's Sentinel or pick your other acronym that they have, but how can I now combine that with other best in class to make sure that we have it. And by the way, not all of our applications have the same level of need, right? So how do I protect audit data, for example, which is probably one of the crown jewels, or our M&A records that we do due diligence and stuff. Well, that's, because you got to think of yourself, unfortunately, as a state-sponsored attack or bad guys, because what data do we have that would be relevant? And we do that assessment all the time and figure out, okay, we have to keep it up as far as protecting it, whether maybe many years ago it was behind the firewall, it had, proper authentication and, and then it became into keys, and then it became into security, then it became monitoring, right? Every single thing that go into that, and partner with the world's best people who could do signatures on the fly, So we spend a lot of money, and we'll continue to spend a lot of money in this space because we know this is probably the biggest area that could impact us and any other firm out there, by the way. You pretty much take it on the knees when you have a data leak or something. I mean, I'm curious to see how SolarWinds is going to respond after this. But we've all been involved in our fair share of data leaks over the years, and we keep on thinking that these firms are just going to go away or implode, but they don't. So,
and I think that's the amazing thing as well, is that a lot of organizations, they appear, or they have this opinion that it's only the SolarWinds or the FireEyes or the big multinationals that are targets, right? But it's the mid-tier that are probably being targeted even more because of the success rate of those type of attacks as well, right? And I think, look, it's only, unfortunately, until an attack happens to an organization that they really kind of wake up and say, okay, now it's time that we need to go and spend to build the walls up a little bit higher, right? But it's probably too late already at that point, right?
And you have to start to think of like a bad guy. Okay, well, let's say if the large firms are spending millions, if not billions of dollars on their security type stuff, then how can I get to them, but not directly, right? Or how can I go through, if KPMG, for example, is 150 countries. Well, obviously the big countries have the budget. So if I want to go through the back door, maybe I should go through a smaller country, right? And that's where I got to stand up and go, no, we want the total consistency of that. And, Malaysia, or pick your country. I know you don't have enough money to do that, but if you want KPMG to be on the outside of your door, you will do this, right? So actually, bare minimum set of stuff. And then also, now we're seeing what are the third-party solutions that they're using that the bad guys hiccup on. And by the way, we've done that ourselves from a government standpoint. I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but obviously the Iran power plant or nuclear thing many years ago, right? How they actually went through, was it Siemens, or it's on YouTube documentary. They didn't go direct. They went through a third party, if not a fifth party, that built parts for parts. And then you got to start thinking, where is that supply chain? And what is the weakest link of that? And 5 years ago, we never had to do that.
And I think that's spot on, because let's say the traditional approach is it's someone opening an email and it originates from there, right? But this is sensors within lists, and I read a really kind of interesting case study a number of months ago, right, where it was, why you needed a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat in a fish tank is beyond me, but the attackers got into a company via a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat in a fish tank, right? Which is just bananas when you think about it, right? But this is where the next battleground is. It's on the OT sensors, right? This is where it's all happening, right? But no, that's fascinating, John. Thank you, and sorry for going off topic there a little bit, right? Just in terms of the COVID topic as well, right? You know, how do you see this kind of changing, or I suppose forcing the topic of inclusivity, you know, across KPMG or other companies, and you know, how do you see it kind of changing employees' loyalty as well, right now that, you know, for a lot of employees that the world is their oyster because COVID has kind of created this remote working concept, which is so widely accepted, right? What's your take on those two?
Yeah, so we, you know, maybe it was my management style for years and years. It was, you know, bums and seats, right, types of things, and then that's just the way we did it. You know, COVID's changing all that, and you know, I think that we need to be responsive to the lifestyles of everybody, right? So I'm in Dallas, Texas right now, but do I really need to be in Dallas, Texas? You know, I could be in Colorado, I could be in, you know, the Caribbean or wherever, and yeah, Cork, love to be in Cork.
That sounded like a commitment there, John.
It will.
I'll get on to Barry. We'll make it happen.
Just don't put me on the fast net rock. Not much going on there. And I think we have to be responsive, all companies do, because that's the pressure, right? It started, what was it, April timeframe when I was reading reports that Silicon Valley and San Francisco, right, the number of leases or rents cancellation were just going through the roof. And the, you know, people who had, and were making money in years, right, offering double the rate. Now, you know, they were crying that, oh my God, we've got all these people leaving. You know, I can't hit my mortgage. But, you know, I'm like, well, hang on, you just spent the last 10 years, you know, doubling the rent every year. So yeah, things kind of even out. So I was like, ooh, there's a shift here. And it's a ripple, because it started there. And those people, they weren't moving to Oakland or something. They were moving to Colorado. They were moving to places they always wanted to go, but work stopped them from going, right? And we've got to support that as well. And maybe it is just get an RV and just drive around the country. When you got a call, pull over. You know, now that we got 5G, you put a little green screen, you know, behind you, and you put whatever background you want, and you're good. And I think if companies take the old adage of nope, bums in seats, or no, you do this, or oh, you're moving to Colorado, well, let's do a cost of living adjustments, and let's do this and that, and you know, we're going to take 10% away. Okay, I get it, but those people are going to leave because you know, they're going to go to their destination they want. And you know, especially in the technology space, and this is our challenge, right? Is that from a technology standpoint, every company is doubling down on their technology spend and investments, because they know technology is the way to get us through here, and that's the new enabler, and it'll always be that way. So if I'm in technology, okay, you're not letting me what I want. Now my life purpose is about my dreams, my realization, my focus, not my career growth, right? Because COVID proved it could be over next year. So I'm going to focus on that. And if you don't support me and the way I want to work or the way I want to live, I go to the next guy.
And I think that's a great point, actually, because it was actually we had the CIO of VMware at our first session, and he was mentioning exactly the same thing, as it's nearly helped everyone kind of reset a little bit in terms of what's important to them and what type of work-life balance they're looking for, et cetera, right? So it's the inflexible employers that'll really lose out here, right? And no, I think it's a great point, John. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't, you know, I just hear from HR on what our policies are, and it just seems like our policies this. Oh, hang on just a minute, I'll get back to you tomorrow, because they are changing, and they're having to deal with that as well. I mean, KPMG, at least within the U.S. Firm, I think it was last month, just gave everybody, you know, I think it was an extra 1,000 or something, just to get desks, to get chairs, to get, you know, and this is tax-free type of thing. You know, I've been at the firm 23 years. I've never seen that. You know, so they responded, say, I get it. I know you got to do that. And I know it's red tape to put it through the internal purchasing process. I tell you what, here's cash. Go do what you got to do. No restrictions.
That's awesome. And you know, I think it's very interesting, because like in the past, I'd say if we were sitting here a year ago or 2 years ago, we would have said, look, this was your traditional kind of millennium, the new employees coming into the market, they have these demands, which personally I thought were right in terms of the work-life balance, etc. But this, because of this reset, it's now nearly a demand of the majority. You know, regardless of how long you're in your career, it's like, you know, we've all had that reset in terms of what's important to us from a career perspective, work-life balance, etc. I think it's no longer just a a millennial demand, which it was, you know, wrongly kind of stated in the past, I would say, right?
Yep.
But it's cool to see that shift. It really is.
So we've got a multi-million-dollar investment in this year, well, starting, I guess, next month, looking at citizen developer programs, right? Whether it's the Power BI, the ServiceNow, whatever, you know, type of solutions, but it's how can we cultivate the citizen developer or the low-code, no-code type of thing. And we did a study that said that today the mindset of the low-code, no-code citizen developer and the age bracket that generally focuses on that, you know, makes up about 20% of the workforce, right? In 5 years, it will make up 90% of the workforce. So that's something that, and that's just a change of people's mindset, whether it's an age thing and, you know, people are moving out, younger people getting in. I think it's a little bit of that, but it's also the issue of technology is no longer left to the IT people.
Absolutely.
Right? Technology is, you know, I have my iPhone, I'm a technologist, you know, type stuff. And, you know, low code, no code, everybody's going to be in IT soon. So we have to embrace that as opposed to protect it.
Yeah. And I think that's where, you know, the evolution of IT has changed so dramatically over the last 20 years, right? Where, you know, it was, as you said, the ones and zeros, it's looking after the servers and the switches and stuff, and it's just changed so dramatically, right? But I think it kind of segues into another question I actually had for you, right? So look, we have a couple of students on here today. We always get a good attendance from students as well on these sessions. And so look, they're, you know, obviously very early in their career and kind of looking, you know, it's very hard to try to figure out what's going to be the skills needed in 10 years time, right? What would be your advice for, you know, students that are looking to kind of start out their career in IT or in tech? You know, what are the skills that you think, you know, would be applicable in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so if I had the opportunity to start over right now, you know, I would look at where are the areas that are challenging to fill right now, but also what are the jobs that nobody wants to do that will need to be happening. I mean, let's be honest, right? It'd be great to be a technology architecture person that works with the business and under whiteboards and comes up with solutions. Okay, great, but that's pretty competitive, right?
Yeah.
You've really got to be on your game for that, you know, to separate yourself as the best in the business to do that. I would focus more on the regulatory requirements, the security aspects, and I'm just going from where we cannot find those skill sets. And to be honest, money is not really an issue, you know, when it comes to that, because of the issues of penalties, of client demands, and anything in that regulatory space, compliance, cyber, right? That's going to be our biggest investment really for the next 10 years, is to keep up with that. And it takes a certain individual to be good in that area. Another area is as the kind of the soft lawyers to IT and the risk mitigation and kind of articulating those. That's a tough job to do. So I'd be focusing on how can I have a little bit of legal expertise, technology knowledge, and also that risk and regulatory issue. Those are specific skill sets that aren't out there, right? So that's where I would say focus. If you're not already set in a certain path, that's areas that will be in high demand, whether it's banking or professional services or whatever. We're all going to need that.
Fantastic. No, really, really good advice, John. Thank you. And look, I'm conscious as well that we're coming up towards our time. I just want to ask you one last question, if you don't mind, right? So throughout COVID, you know, what's been your own kind of personal kind of lessons learned kind of throughout COVID over the last kind of 6 to 8 months, let's say?
Yeah, I guess embrace change. That's been tough. And just know that you're going to have, look, you know, my job before COVID was to fly around the world, right? And shake hands and go to committee meetings and steering groups and trying to get consensus and build and, you know, have regional meetings. And, you know, I travel internationally 2 or 3 weeks out of the month.
Wow.
And that changed. And yes, you know, I went through a period, what I call itchy butt. You know, I was sitting here, you know, all day and all that stuff going, oof, oof, oof. But it's embrace it, you know, figure out, okay, I've got work here, but what else is my passion, right? So once that video click goes off, then quickly change mindset to enjoy life, whatever that's walking, you know, hey, I got an hour and a half gap between this call and that call. Let's just get on the trail real quick, go 45 minutes, turn around, come back, and just enjoy nature. type stuff. And it's really just embracing the change and don't get frustrated, right? Especially if we get politics involved with the US elections and handover. It's easy to go, oh my God, I can't believe, just deal with what you can change and focus and just have fun and just live your life.
Love it. Love it. I don't know about you, John, but at home, I have my suitcase is very close to my desk, and I found myself at certain periods over the last few months just staring longingly at the suitcase empty, just wanting to do a trial pack or a trial run to the airport or something, right? Just for old time's sake.
I think those days are done. Even once we all get the vaccine, everything's back to normal, whatever that is. I don't see myself traveling or anybody else traveling as much as that is. So, I think this is it. As you can see in my room, what I did, I took over my son's room. I called in eminent domain rights and set up a mini studio, right? I got lights, I got, the camera, I got a nice background. I need a picture, but that's something I'll get. Because I enjoyed doing something like that. I enjoyed kind of going the extra step because it represented me and what I wanted to portray. And I had fun. Would I have done that a year ago? No, I would have turned on the normal laptop camera and been happy with it.
Yeah, I must say I'm guilty of that today. And I know I told you I was super envious, but I promise over Christmas, this is my project. I'm going to lock myself away to try to fix so I might be in touch. I might be in touch looking for some tips.
I'll send you the website link. that gives you the 4 options per your budget. So I made it to step 3. I couldn't afford step 4.
I'm super intrigued. I can't wait to see it, John. Can't wait to see it. But John, look, I'm conscious you're a very busy man, and look, I'm conscious we're kind of coming up towards the top of the hour, right? So look, genuinely, I really wanted to thank you. I'm delighted that this is kind of how we finished the series for 2020. I could think of no better way to end it, right? Also, look, I wanted to thank you, but equally, I wanted to thank kind of KPMG for all their support as well over the last few months, right? It's just been phenomenal, right? And they've been massive supporters of the organization forever. So look, let's say with that in mind, I just wanted to, I suppose, wish you a great Christmas and kind of hoping for a bit of a calmer 2021, hopefully. Right?
God, I hope so. I don't know how it can be rougher.
Absolutely. John, thank you very much and have a lovely weekend, right? Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.